In a future where humanity has conquered aging, life comes with a cruel price. People stop growing older at 25, and from that moment, a glowing timer on their arm begins to count down. Everyone is given just one more year to live, and every second after that must be earned. Time itself has become currency, used to buy food, pay rent, and even gamble. This world is sharply divided. In the luxurious streets of New Greenwich, the rich can buy centuries and live for generations, where death is nothing more than a rumor. But in the grim neighborhoods of Dayton, the poor fight every single day for the last minutes of their lives. Will Salas wakes up in his small, dim room, the numbers on his arm pulsing like a reminder of the life slipping away. He gets ready for the day and steps into the kitchen, where his mother Rachel is already preparing to leave.
Happy 50th.
Today is her 50th birthday, though in this world, she still looks 25. Will wishes her a happy birthday and shows her the bottle of wine he managed to get from New Greenwich, a rare luxury in Dayton. She smiles, but when he asks how much time she has left, she admits she only has 3 days, most of it already owed to bills. She explains that she will not be home tonight, and that after paying the bills, she won't even have enough time left to ride the bus without his help.
Let me give you 30 minutes so you can have a decent lunch.
I love you.
Will promises to meet her at the bus stop tomorrow and stay careful. Stepping outside, Will is immediately confronted by the harsh reality of Dayton. A desperate young woman named Maya approaches, pleading for just a little time to pay her bills.
Here, take 5 minutes.
Will transfers 5 minutes to her without hesitation, watching relief wash over her face. From there, he meets his friend Burrell at a small coffee shop, where the rising cost of a single cup has them grumbling. The barista doesn't care. In Dayton, complaining changes nothing. While drinking their coffee, the two friends notice a group of men gambling away their lifespans. But Will has no interest in gambling or fighting. He knows how easily a man can lose everything. On their way to work, they pass the lifeless body of someone whose time finally ran out, a sight so common that even pity feels routine. The factory is loud and relentless, filled with workers racing against quotas that never stop rising. When Will collects his pay at the end of the day, he realizes he earned less than he expected. The accountant coldly explains that he didn't meet the new quota and therefore gets no extra time. Frustrated but powerless, Will leaves the factory and heads to a local bar to meet Burrell. The bar is alive with noise, and Burrell is already drunk. He explains that a man named Henry has been buying rounds for the entire place because he's carrying a full century on his clock. Will notices the man, clearly from New Greenwich, sitting far too comfortably for someone surrounded by people who could kill him for his time. Across the room, Will spots a gang watching Henry like predators. Minutemen, the enforcers who hunt for easy prey.
Minutemen, walk away, Will.
Burrell urges Will to leave, knowing the Minutemen never play fair. Will hesitates, torn between self-preservation and a feeling he can't shake. He lingers near Henry, watching the gang close in, and makes a choice to stay. In Dayton, a single second can be the difference between life and death, and tonight, danger is closing in. After Burrell stumbles out of the bar, Will lingers in the shadows, watching the room with careful eyes. Across the floor, the leader of the Minutemen, a cold man named Fortis, speaks openly about the stranger's wealth of time. He wants the sentry on Henry's arm for himself and plans to take it in a fight. Henry looks uneasy and excuses himself to the restroom, trying to delay the inevitable. Before the rich man can return, Will makes his move. He knocks one of Fortis's men off balance and pulls Henry toward the back exit. The gang leader sees the escape, and his face hardens with anger, ordering his crew to chase them. The two fugitives sprint through dark alleys until Will finds an abandoned building where they can hide for the night. Safe for the moment, he turns to Henry and demands to know why someone with so much time would risk walking into a place like Dayton. Henry doesn't give much of an answer. He hands Will a drink, and they settle in for the night. When Henry asks Will's age, the young man says 28, while Henry calmly reveals that he's lived 105 years. Will warns him to stay out of Dayton if he wants to make it to 106, but Henry shakes his head. He's ready to die. He explains that living forever has its price, and immortality for a few requires death for many. Taxes rise, prices climb, and the poor are left to run out of time so that the rich can keep hoarding centuries. Will listens as Henry shares a belief that there is more than enough time in the world for everyone to live a full life, if only it were shared. When Henry asks what Will would do with such wealth, Will admits he'd stop checking his arm and never waste a single second. Eventually, the young man drifts to sleep, unaware that Henry has already made up his mind. At dawn, Henry wakes quietly and transfers his century to Will, leaving himself with just 5 minutes. When Will opens his eyes, the glowing digits on his arm stun him. 100 years now tick down where only hours had been before. He notices a message on the window, "Don't waste my time." Panicked, Will rushes outside and sees Henry sitting on the edge of a bridge, waiting for his last moments to slip away. Will sprints toward him, but it's too late. Henry's clock hits 0, and he falls silently into the water below. Shaken, Will leaves the scene, unaware that a nearby camera has captured everything. He heads to Burrell's home, where his friend's wife, Greta, answers the door with their baby in her arms. Burrell steps outside, and Will silently shows him the century glowing on his arm. Shock spreads across his friend's face as Will explains how Henry gave it to him. Burrell warns that carrying that much time through Dayton is dangerous, but Will has already decided on his next move. He asks how long they've been friends. When Burrell answers 10 years, Will presses his arm against his friend's and transfers an entire decade, thanking him for always being there. Burrell can hardly believe it. Will tells him he's leaving for New Greenwich now, finally able to bring his mother to safety. After Will walks away, Burrell stares at the new wealth on his arm and announces to Greta that he's heading to the bar. Meanwhile, Rachel finishes paying her bills and boards a bus back toward Dayton. But when she steps inside, the driver tells her the fare has gone up to 2 hours. Rachel glances at her arm. She only has an hour and a half left. Rachel freezes at the bus door, staring at the fare. It had always been 1 hour, but now the driver says it's 2. She begs to ride anyway, promising her son will pay the difference when she reaches Dayton.
My son is meeting me.
Can't do that. Policy.
It's a 2-hour walk. Please, I have an hour and a half.
Then you better run.
Panic surges through her, and she bolts down the empty road, racing against the clock on her arm. At the same time, Will waits at the bus stop holding flowers, scanning every passenger. When the bus arrives and his mother isn't there, dread sets in. He realizes she must have run out of time to board. He sprints toward her workplace, hoping to intercept her. They finally spot each other on the open street. Will pushes himself harder, reaching out to give her time. But just before their hands touch, Rachel's clock hits 0. She collapses in his arms, lifeless. Devastated, Will clutches her, knowing there's nothing he can do. The next day, he leaves Dayton with a single mission. He hires a taxi to New Greenwich and pays an entire year of time to cross the security zones. During the ride, the driver asks why someone like him is heading to the city of the rich. Will says he's going to make them pay for his mother's death. When they arrive, Will runs straight to a luxury hotel. Across the lot, a young woman named Sylvia notices him just as she's stepping into her car. Her eyes linger. Inside, Will books a suite, determined to blend into the world he has never known. Meanwhile, the timekeepers arrive in Dayton to retrieve Henry's body. They know he carried a century, yet he died with nothing. Senior timekeeper Raymond instructs his partners, Yeager and Corse, to follow the trail of time to find the one responsible. At their office, surveillance footage confirms Will was at the bridge when Henry died. Corse notes that the video never shows how Henry lost his time, but Raymond doesn't care. Since the century hasn't circulated in Dayton, he's sure Will already left town. Back in New Greenwich, Will enjoys his first expensive meal at the hotel restaurant. Sylvia is nearby and keeps stealing glances at him. A waitress approaches to collect payment, and Will casually tips her extra minutes. She smiles and says he must be new.
You're not from around here, are you? You do everything a little too fast.
Not everything.
When Will asks about the casino, she gives him directions. At the poker table, he faces a wealthy businessman named Philippe, who immediately studies him with curiosity. Will claims he's just gambling his inheritance, and Philippe raises the stakes. Will confidently matches the bet. Sylvia soon joins her father at the table, and Will notices her charm immediately. Philippe continues to push the bets higher, and Will risks everything he has left in one final hand. Against the odds, he wins. His clock now overflows with time. Felipe is impressed by his nerve, and Will calmly says he always knew he would win. Felipe introduces Sylvia as his daughter and invites Will to a party at their mansion the next evening. Will accepts without hesitation. Elsewhere, the timekeepers continue their investigation. By now, Raymond knows the man they're chasing. He tells Yeager that he never knew Will personally, but he remembers his father. Later that day, Will arrives in style, driving a sleek new car toward Felipe's sprawling mansion for the evening party. Philippe greets him warmly and introduces him to the family, their estate glimmering with wealth and eternal youth. As the party bustles with elegant guests, Will finds himself momentarily alone. Sylvia approaches, her personal bodyguard trailing behind. She waves the man off, asking for space. Will chuckles at the formality, and Sylvia explains that her father insists she always has protection. Curious, she asks Will what he does for work. He admits he hasn't figured that out yet. Sylvia smiles, saying there's no rush. They have all the time in the world. She invites him to dance. As as they sway under the golden lights. Philippe watches the pair with sharp suspicion. Sylvia leans in, noting that Will doesn't move like the wealthy men she knows. He moves like someone from Dayton. She says she envies people from the poor zones because they actually live life without limits. Meanwhile, the rich can live forever, but rarely take risks. Will pauses, inspired, and whispers that he has an idea. Moments later, he sneaks Sylvia out of the house and toward the dark ocean. He dares her to jump with him. At first, she hesitates, but then takes the leap. The two plunge into the water, laughing, free for the first time. Meanwhile, her bodyguards scramble in panic to find her. They sneak back into the house, dripping wet. The carefree moment ends abruptly as the mansion doors burst open. Timekeepers flood the room, led by Raymond. He immediately requests a private conversation with Will. Felipe grants it, and the timekeepers escort Will to the office. Inside, Raymond questions Will about the century on his clock. Will calmly explains that Henry gave him the time willingly. Raymond doesn't believe it and orders his men to confiscate nearly all of Will's time, leaving him with only 2 hours. Will challenges them, asking why they investigate a suicide when countless murders happen in Dayton every day. Raymond pauses, almost amused, and says that Will sounds just like his father, who once asked the same question. Before Will can respond, Raymond leaves the office. Seizing the moment, Will fights the remaining timekeepers and takes Sylvia hostage to prevent them from shooting. He drags her outside and flees in his car. As they speed down the dark road, Sylvia begs him to take her home. Will refuses, explaining that he needs her alive to survive. The timekeepers give chase, but Will narrowly escapes by breaking through a roadblock. When the car finally stops, his clock is nearly empty. Desperate, he begs Sylvia for time. Distrusting him, she refuses, accusing him of lying about being rich. The next morning, the unlikely pair drives into Dayton, but danger strikes again. Fortis and his Minutemen ambush them, sending the car crashing. Will and Sylvia are knocked unconscious. The gang checks their arms, realizing Will no longer carries the stolen century. Seeing that Sylvia has a decade left, Fortis drains nearly all of it, leaving her with only 30 minutes. When the gang departs, Will and Sylvia awaken amid the wreckage. Sylvia checks her clock in horror and realizes she's been robbed. Will grimly explains that it could only have been the Minutemen. Sylvia froze in panic as she saw her clock drop to just 30 minutes. Desperation replaced her fear, and she begged Will to help her survive. He hesitated, reminding her how quickly she had judged him, but he still reached for her arm and gave her some of his time. With a little life restored, the two of them escaped the wreck, leaving the shattered car behind. Moments later, Raymond and the timekeepers arrived at the crash site. The senior officer studied the empty streets and the damaged vehicle, immediately realizing that Will had returned to Dayton. When Yeager suggested chasing them, Raymond stayed calm. He said that Will would come to them on his own. Will and Sylvia soon reached Burrell's house, hoping for help. Instead, they were met by Greta, his grieving widow. Her voice shook with anger as she explained that Burrell had drunk himself to death after receiving a decade from Will. She blamed Will for the tragedy and ordered him to leave. With no allies and little time, Will noticed Sylvia's diamond earrings and decided to trade them. At a small shop nearby, the jewelry bought them 2 days of borrowed life. Armed with this small cushion, Will called Felipe's mansion and demanded to speak to Raymond. He gave his ultimatum: 1,000 years must be transferred into Dayton's time zones by sunrise, or Sylvia would not return. Raymond remained steady and warned him not to repeat his father's mistakes, but Will ended the call. Back at the mansion, Philippe refused to pay the ransom, even when his wife urged him to save their daughter. He would never allow his wealth to enrich the people of Dayton. Meanwhile, Will took Sylvia to his modest home, where she changed into a dress that had belonged to his mother. The young woman softened as Will spoke about his parents. He explained that his father was a fighter who knew how to win by waiting for the right moment, even demonstrating his father's signature arm flip trick. He believed that his father had been killed for giving away the time he had won. By morning, the ransom had not arrived. Will decided to let Sylvia go and escorted her to a payphone with a gun for protection. He watched from across the street as she called her father, anger filling her voice as she confronted him for refusing to save her life. Suddenly, Raymond appeared and raised his weapon toward Will. Sylvia spun around, startled, and fired. The bullet struck Raymond, sending him to the ground. Will rushed to check his clock and saw that the timekeeper was almost out of time. Raymond explained that timekeepers lived this way so no one could steal from them. Despite everything, Will gave him some of his time and told told him to take it as a gift. Will and Sylvia then escaped in Raymond's car. As they drove away, Sylvia asked why he had spared the man. Will explained that timekeepers lived day to day, and he simply wanted to help him survive long enough to be rescued. Shortly after, Yeager and the other officers found Raymond still alive in Dayton. They were surprised that he had not run out of time, and confusion filled Yeager's face as he saw the extra hours glowing on his superior's arm. Will and Sylvia soon abandoned Raymond's car, knowing it was too recognizable. They hijacked a taxi instead, stealing both the vehicle and the time from its driver and passenger. Days later, the two of them were branded as dangerous fugitives. Their faces flashed across news broadcasts, and the city of New Greenwich treated them as criminals. Raymond later met with Philippe to discuss his daughter. The wealthy man insisted that Sylvia must be under Will's influence, but Raymond had no interest in arguing. When Philippe tried to bribe him into dropping the case, Raymond refused and revealed that he had already issued a warrant for Sylvia's arrest. He warned that if Philippe interfered, he would go to jail as well. Meanwhile, in Dayton, Will began teaching Sylvia how to handle a gun. She wanted to know if he was serious about sharing stolen time with the people who had nothing. Will confirmed he was, and Sylvia offered to help him take as much time as he needed. That night, they struck their first major target, a time-lending office owned by Philippe. The break-in was swift and precise. Will and Sylvia looted several time capsules and encouraged the frightened workers to grab what they could for themselves. Later, they distributed the stolen time throughout Dayton, with Greta and Maya among the grateful recipients. From a distance, Raymond watched these reports with disbelief. To him, giving away time would only empower thieves and cause more chaos. He vowed to capture the pair before their actions unraveled the system. Back in New Greenwich, Philippe fumed as he watched the news. The timekeepers now offered rewards for anyone who turned in his daughter. While Philippe saw betrayal in Sylvia's actions, his wife quietly reminded him that his control had suffocated their daughter, and she had simply broken free. Later that night, Raymond tracked Will and Sylvia to a safe house. The couple sensed danger and slipped away just before the timekeepers could trap them. The following day, they checked into a new hotel and bought out every room to secure their privacy. Still, one man noticed them heading upstairs. He left without trouble, but carried the memory with him. That night, Fortis and his Minutemen prowled the streets of Dayton, pressuring locals for information. After they killed an innocent bystander, the man from the hotel confessed, demanding a share of the bounty. Fortis promised he would be rewarded. Inside the quiet hotel room, Sylvia reflected on their time together, admitting that she had no regrets. Will had saved her from a life of empty safety. Their moment of peace ended abruptly when Fortis and his men broke into the room. The gang leader declared that Will had gone too far and that he had come to restore order. Fortis offered a single chance, an arm wrestling match for time. Will accepted, and as the contest began, he used his father's trick, waiting until the final moment to flip his opponent's arm. One by one, Fortis and his men fell, their clocks running out. Will and Sylvia left the hotel alive, but with nowhere else to run. Moments later, Raymond arrived to find the bodies. He accused Will of simply taking more and more time, but Yeager quietly suggested that Will might also be doing good by giving it away. Even Raymond had survived because of the man he hunted. The senior timekeeper ignored the comment, stating coldly that he would continue doing his job. Elsewhere, Will finally admitted to Sylvia that they were running out of options. All the time they had stolen could never truly break the system. In his voice, for the first time, was the weight of surrender. Sylvia asked Will how much time it would truly take to shake the leaders of New Greenwich. Will answered with the cold truth. Only 1,000,000 years would make them feel it. Sylvia refused to give up. She promised she knew a way to get exactly that. The next morning, the two of them walked straight into Felipe's corporate tower. Sylvia distracted her father's staff while Will slipped past the security. Moments later, he confronted Felipe, forcing him to order his guards to lower their weapons. Together, Will and Sylvia escorted him into his office and opened the vault using the code Sylvia had learned long ago. Inside, Will froze. The vault was stacked with time, an entire 1,000,000 years glowing on the walls. He whispered that they could save countless lives with it, but Felipe tried to warn him. Giving the poor more time, he said, would only extend their suffering. Sylvia rejected her father's cold logic, insisting that time would give people a real chance to live. Felipe countered that flooding Dayton with time could destroy the system, but his daughter didn't care. To her, no one should live forever while others died every day. Will listened, anger simmering, but he held it back. He finally told Philippe that immortality for a few wasn't worth the death of millions. Then they walked out with the million-year capsule. Back at the agency, Raymond received the report. Someone had just stolen 1,000,000 years from New Greenwich. He immediately hit the road, calling for backup and ordering his men to shoot on sight. In his rush, he didn't refill his own time. Will and Sylvia headed for Dayton only to find the roads blocked by timekeepers. Without hesitation, Will pushed the car forward, racing past the barricade as Raymond closed in behind them. Just as they reached Dayton, Raymond rammed their vehicle, sending it skidding to a stop. Will leapt out and handed the capsule to Maya, instructing her to give it to the man who ran the city's timelines. Maya, wide-eyed with disbelief, ran to deliver it. Moments later, the timelines opened, flooding Dayton's streets with people eager for their share of time. The chaos bought Will and Sylvia a chance to escape, but Raymond caught up again. He cornered them at gunpoint. Will calmly observed that the senior timekeeper must have grown up in Dayton. Raymond admitted it was long ago and that he had simply found a way out. He also said he couldn't let anyone else escape. The system depended on it. Will reminded him of the time he had lent him earlier. Without it, Raymond wouldn't survive long enough to take them back for execution. Raymond finally looked at his arm and saw only seconds left. He collapsed in the street as his clock ran out. Panic hit Will and Sylvia when they realized they had only moments left themselves. Will sprinted to Raymond's car, grabbed the spare time, and rushed back, transferring precious seconds to Sylvia just in time. Back in New Greenwich, Philippe's aides begged him to intervene. He simply said it was too late. On the news, Dayton's people celebrated, their clocks full for the first time. Many abandoned their jobs and began marching toward New Greenwich to claim new lives. At the agency, Yeager told the remaining staff to go home. He laid down his gun and walked out, leaving the system to collapse on its own. Much later, Will and Sylvia were still fugitives, but that didn't stop them from robbing another massive bank. Will had started his fight after losing his mother to an empty clock. Now, with Sylvia by his side, he struck back at the wealthy who hoarded life itself. Together, they took down the Minutemen, stole enough time to free Dayton, and became symbols of rebellion. In the end, their story showed that change begins when ordinary people refuse to obey a system built on injustice.